Welcome to the Feed Your Family Tonight podcast. Do you dread hearing the question, what's for dinner? Whether you spend your days keeping up with toddlers, running kids to after-school activities, or juggling a career and family, getting dinner on the table can be a struggle for us all. I'm Mariefiebach, a business owner, wife, and mom of 4. I'm on a mission to build stronger families one dinner at a time, and I'm here with tips, tricks, and inspiration you need to feed your family tonight. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Feed Your Family Tonight podcast, episode 135. I'm your host, Mariefiebach, and today is a replay of an episode I recorded a couple years back about vacation food planning. It was recorded pre-pandemic, but I know that the world is starting to open up and many of us are trying to get out of Dodge and get out into the world as much as we can, as safely as we can. This is the first of 2 parts of vacation food planning. The second part is going to air next week. This episode focuses on vacation food planning when you are flying or maybe even driving, but you are staying in hotels. Next week's episode is going to focus on when you are staying in rentals or cabins and talks a little bit about family reunion planning, which again, probably isn't happening quite this year, but you might want to listen just to be ready when you schedule that family reunion for next year. So friends, if you are itching to get back into the world and know that you're going to have to feed your family while you're on vacation, listen to this episode and next week's episode to get some great ideas and inspiration. This week's podcast is going to focus on vacations where you are mainly staying in hotels. And next week's podcast is going to focus on staying in cabins or Airbnbs and also large family reunions, because the food is very similar for those 2 situations, just at a different scale. The first thing I want you to think about when you are planning food for your family vacation is think about what kind of vacation are you actually going on? And today, the focus is a vacation where you're mainly staying in hotels. That's important because you want to think about what kind of hotel are you staying in? Does this hotel have a breakfast on site? Is the price included in the cost of the hotel room? And if you can choose it, I always recommend picking a hotel with a breakfast on site rather than having to leave the premises for breakfast. And if you can get that with the price included, you may be paying a little bit more for the room, but in the end, you're probably going to come out ahead. I'll never forget a few years ago, our family just took a quick little overnight trip to Oklahoma. We're in Kansas, so it was really close. And I wanted to stay in an Embassy Suites because they always have breakfast included, and I have a large family, and we were at the point where we could still stay in one large hotel room. Now our family is getting such that we almost need 2 rooms, but at that point we could still stay in one large hotel room, and the Embassy Suites in the area was booked, and so they moved us to a DoubleTree, which was fine, but the breakfast wasn't included. And the cost of their breakfast was like $17 a person. And you multiply that by 6 and it adds up really fast. And we would have been better off getting 2 rooms in a less expensive hotel and having breakfast included. That's the first thing you want to think about when you're planning a vacation where you're mainly staying in hotels. You want to think about, the location of the hotels and how close they are to all of the activities that you plan on doing, because that factors into your food as well. Are you going to be trying to go to restaurants in the evening, or are you having lunches while you're out doing your activities? And if you have traveled by airplane to your destination and don't necessarily have a rental car, then that is something else that you want to consider. Are there restaurants close by to this hotel that you have chosen? So even before you start thinking specifically about the food, you want to think about where you are staying. last year we had the opportunity to take our family on a vacation that we were staying mainly in hotels for. And I have a dear friend, her name is Anne, and she is a world traveler. She lives to travel, and she gave me so much good advice when I was planning this particular trip that we were taking. And one thing she said was, make sure that you have looked at the restaurants near where you are staying and pick your restaurant for the first night ahead of time. And I said, oh, that's kind of a good idea. And I had looked at some restaurants at our destination and had picked a restaurant, but I hadn't marked it in my phone and I hadn't marked it on my map so that I knew exactly where it was. And we were walking to visit a church. Our family was from the hotel we were staying in. And we walked to visit the church and we walked past this particular restaurant. And I said, oh, that's where we planned to have dinner. And then we kind of got turned around and we were really, really hungry by the time we were done exploring for a bit. And we walked around for an hour trying to find this restaurant. And we kept getting wound and wound around these narrow streets. And I kept thinking, Anne told me to make sure that I knew where this restaurant was the first night, because that first day of travel, you're always super tired. And we ended up finding another restaurant that was a terrible restaurant. It was not great, but I got my family fed. And we got back to the hotel and went to bed and it was fine. But I really wish I would have heeded her advice more closely, because it makes so much sense. No matter where you are going, if you are not going to be staying in a place that has a kitchen, I cannot recommend to you enough getting the restaurants that you plan to eat at picked out ahead of time. Just this past weekend, we were taking a short trip to Kansas City, which for us is like a 3-hour drive. It's not far. And we were meeting up with a larger group of people and expectations weren't clear. And we ended up spending like an hour and a half deciding where we were going to eat. And if we had done that ahead of time, we could have saved that hour and a half of looking at restaurants and will this person be able to eat this here? And will that person be able to eat that there? And it would have been so much easier. It takes a little bit of planning ahead of time. But if you can plan out the restaurants that you want to eat at and the nights that you plan to eat at those restaurants, you will save yourself so much grief. Now, sometimes on vacation, you want to be spontaneous and you want to stumble upon a local cafe or a local breakfast joint or something fun. And I am all for that as well. But if you have something already planned, if you don't stumble onto something, then you have a plan to fall back on. I used TripAdvisor a lot when planning my big trip last year and looking at the pictures and the restaurant reviews and what people said about the restaurant. I remember there was one restaurant that looked really good. It was close to the hotel and it was kind of a fusion restaurant. But when I got to the reviews, they said, this is not a place to bring kids. Well, that told me right away that that was not a place that we were going to need to go. So look at places like TripAdvisor and Yelp. Get some ideas for restaurants that are close to your location and get your restaurants planned ahead of time. It sounds a little bit tedious, and I know so many of you are like myself and you want to be spontaneous and find something fun and local. And that's great. If you are and you have the opportunity to be spontaneous, then you can always change the plans that you've made. I mean, there's nothing set in stone. Most of the time you haven't even made a reservation, but if you have, those can be canceled. But make sure that you think ahead of time. When it comes to that, once you get to your destination and you kind of know the restaurants that you want to stay at, depending upon what type of hotel you're staying at, oftentimes there is a front desk person that can help you with reservations. This is especially important if you happen to be in a foreign country. If you're in a foreign country, use the opportunity that they have at your hotel and ask those front desk people to call and make the reservations for you and listen to their recommendations. Now, this is another place where you can get tripped up. This happens in the United States and it happens overseas. Sometimes restaurants and hotels have agreements that go back and forth, and they'll send people to each other, and there's kickbacks that happen if they're following some of those agreements. And so that's where you kind of double check the recommendations from the hotel on a place like Yelp or TripAdvisor, because sometimes the restaurant isn't that good, but the hotel's getting a kickback to send you there. So that's one little hiccup that you want to be a little bit leery of. But if you're watching that and looking at a few reviews on the internet, you should be okay. And sometimes the recommendations from the people at the front desk are the best restaurants you'll ever have. So you want to use your advice. When our family goes on vacation, we really prefer to find local places to eat rather than major chain restaurants. I feel like that's part of the experience of travel for my children. I want them to know what different locales are like. And so we tend to try and find local places as much as possible. But chain restaurants have their places too, especially at the end of a long trip when your family's kind of getting tired of eating out and tired of whining. Sometimes something that is just really simple and really stable and you know exactly what you're going to get can be a really nice change of pace. When our family is having vacations where we're staying exclusively in hotels, one thing that I try and do is try and plan at least one day where we eat lunch from the grocery store. And this looks different every time, but in general, especially about halfway through a trip, our family is tired of a lot of heavy restaurant food and we're just ready for something lighter. Also, halfway through a trip, I always try and schedule an afternoon of downtime where if there's something extra we want to do, we can throw it in there. But it's always nice to just have a quiet afternoon where everybody can kind of just decompress from the go of vacation. And this is the day that I usually try and schedule a grocery store lunch. Anytime we're traveling, we try and look on the map and see if there is a grocery store somewhat nearby to the location that we are at. And grocery store lunches look different in different locales. Sometimes I don't even buy plates. Sometimes I anticipate it and I bring paper plates in my luggage. We have been known to walk into a grocery store and buy a few boxes of crackers and a couple of packages of like deli meats or cured salamis and a package of cheese and some type of a fruit. I have even been known to just buy a bag of pre-washed lettuce and like my kids will like just grab handfuls of the lettuce out of the bag. I'm not saying it's pretty, but I'm saying that for our family, it's always a big relief to just have a low-key lunch that we can just eat in our hotel room and kind of snack on for an hour or two, not just have a sit-down meal where we feel like we have to eat and leave. My kids like to graze, especially when they're at home, but on vacation, especially about halfway through, they're just ready for a slow afternoon of grazing. Last year when we were traveling in the summer, we found that cherries were in season. And so a couple of times went to the grocery store for lunch and we bought some cherries and meats and cheeses and crackers and just kind of had a slow lunch. And it was such a nice break from the heavy restaurant food that we had been having so much. On that heavy restaurant food, something else is that I try and encourage my kids to get salads. And a lot of times that means that my kids are ordering off the adult menu rather than the kids menu because so many of the adult entrees will come with a salad included in the price. And I've just found that my kids are happier if they're getting a little bit of vegetables. At home, we eat salads every night. And if they're not getting the salads on vacations, their body can kind of start feeling it a little bit and they start getting a little bit grumpy. And so a lot of times I encourage my kids to order off the adult menu rather than the kids menu if it comes with a salad so that they can get a little bit more vegetables in their system. So that's kind of another way to manage hotel vacations. I'm going to kind of change gears here and talk a little bit about snacks on vacation in general. Snacks are kind of a big deal, and it really depends upon the type of vacation that you're taking. Snacks can make the difference between having kids that are having a great time and having kids that are cranky and about to melt down. And so I really encourage you to think ahead and bring your snacks with you rather than try and purchase them there. Think of things that your family likes to eat and buy them. This is the time where, again, I like to spend a little extra money and buy things that are packaged in individual sized portions and bring them along with me. You also want to think about, are you in Colorado or somewhere in the mountains and you're hiking and you're going to be away from, modern civilization for extended periods of time? If you're going to do that, you want to make sure that you are packing and bringing snacks. And it's so much easier to have those snacks thought of ahead of time. Some of my favorite snacks to bring are Kind bars. And I like to find the Kind bars that aren't dipped in chocolate, because the chocolate can sometimes melt if it's in a pocket or if it's summer and it's hot outside. I try and find granola bars that don't have chocolate in them. This isn't individually packaged, but sometimes even just like cereal or little things of trail mix that have nuts and raisins and sometimes a little bit of chocolate in there. Growing up, my mother would never, ever allow anything chocolate on vacation ever. She had this incredible fear of the chocolate melting. She wouldn't even let us do M&Ms that were in like the candy shell. And part of that has stuck with me, and part of it I kind of roll my eyes and let it go. But my mother would never let us have anything chocolate on vacation ever, because she was always worried that the chocolate would melt and it would get on the car seats and everything else. So if you're worried about big messes in your car, you may heed her advice and avoid all things chocolate on vacation in general. I like to have a few treats, things that my kids don't get very often, and I usually try and pack those too. But you want to think about snacks. Even if you're traveling by plane or staying in a hotel, you want to make sure that you have snacks with you to go along. My last piece of advice is one that you're probably not going to be surprised to hear from me, but it is something that I will say over and over again, is anytime you're traveling anywhere, I don't even care if it's just to the grocery store, always have your kids and yourself have a water bottle with you. I like to have my kids have just, a really nice reusable water bottle. And when we are traveling to places, I always bring those with us. If you're traveling by plane, you can take them empty through TSA and then refill on the other side. If you're really concerned about the filtration of your water, it's still way cheaper to buy large things of filtered water once you get to your destination than it is to buy a bunch of water bottles. Although, honestly, I've been known to get to a destination and buy a case of water bottles, just like regular Dasani or Walmart brand water bottles, and have them in the hotel. But my kids still like to pour them inside their reusable water bottles because they have straws. And so always have your kids have water bottles with them. Get in the habit of always having a water bottle with you. Your kids will drink more water. You will save so much money. You'll keep them hydrated. They won't beg for the sodas quite as much. And the water bottles are something that you want to just get in the habit of having with you. My kids are learning that their water bottle is always at their side. And no matter what kind of vacation you're taking, it is so important that your kids always have water bottles with them. So for now, friends, that's the part one of vacation food planning, where we kind of focus on what happens when you're staying just in a hotel the whole time. Next week, we're going to get into some nitty-gritty of vacation planning when you're actually bringing food with you or preparing food. So I'm going to talk about staying in like cabins and Airbnbs. road trips, and also planning for large family gatherings, which all of those things take a different kind of meal planning than they do when you're at a hotel. To kind of recap today, when you're staying in a hotel, first of all, everybody needs a water bottle. Second, you want to think about, does the place you're staying at have breakfast? And I always recommend trying to find a place with breakfast on site, if at all possible. And if you can get that included in the price, even better. Think about what restaurants you're going to stay at and plan them ahead of time. Do not make the same mistake I did. Mark it on the map so that you know exactly where it is so you don't get lost. Even if you're planning to be spontaneous, which I totally recommend, have a backup ready to go. Have your restaurants ready to go. It will make your life so much easier. And think about those snacks. Bring them from home if you can, especially if you're doing things where you're going to be far away from your hotel during the day. Have those snacks ready and have your kids get in the habit of bringing them along with them with their water bottles. So for now, friends, thanks so much for listening. I can't wait to talk with you next week about the rest of vacation food planning. You have got this. Take